Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Vanessa Carlisle, who's here to share with us the Nautilus award-winning book, Awaken Your Sexuality, a guide to connection and intimacy after addiction and trauma. What if healing from trauma isn't just about surviving, but about rediscovering joy, intimacy, and the freedom to truly feel alive again? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Dr. Vanessa Carlisle holds an MFA from Emerson College, a PhD in creative writing, literature, and gender studies from the University of Southern California, and a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Dr. Carlisle co-authored the Gold Nautilus award-winning book, Awaken Your Sexuality, with Dr. Stephanie Covington, and their book was also awarded the gold in the Independent Publishing Book Awards. So welcome to the show, Dr. Vanessa Carlisle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this, and why do you feel this is a conversation that was really needed now?
Well, I have a co-author on this book who is Dr. Stephanie Covington, who's been working in the field of addiction recovery for a very long time. And this is an issue that we both are very passionate about. She had a book from the 90s on this topic that had some great ideas, but really needed to be rethought and restructured. And so we started talking together about doing a new book for now that took some of the ideas she had been talking about in the 90s that are still true, still happening in recovery circles and in therapeutic circles, and creating a text for now.
Well, that's pretty exciting, especially when such work gets like an update and some great information included. Why is sexuality so often overlooked in conversations around addiction recovery and trauma healing?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because so many people who, especially women, queer folks, non-binary folks who have experienced trauma, sexual trauma is a huge part of that for a lot of people, right? And also, especially for women, we do have data that suggests that women with addictions are extremely likely to have experienced trauma in their history. So the fact that we don't talk about sexuality that much in recovery is sort of a mystery in a way. And I think the real answer is that no one is comfortable talking about it. That the only way you become comfortable in our culture talking about sexuality and relationship issues is to work on it. You have to study, you have to try, you have to put effort into becoming someone who's comfortable, because our dominant culture is very uncomfortable talking about these issues. And that just trickles into the world of recovery.
And so to dovetail with that, how do trauma and addiction shape a person's relationship with intimacy and connection?
Yeah. Trauma and addiction both have the effect of making it difficult to trust other people, difficult to connect with other people in a way that is calm, difficult to trust pleasure and to trust feeling good, or to even know necessarily what does feel good to you. So there's a lot of ways in which someone who is beginning to date or start to want to be more connected to their own body, they have to start with themselves, because especially for someone who's had a trauma around relationships. So let's say childhood abuse or abuse in a relationship, knowing what feels good to you and what feels right for you isn't obvious. This is the advice you sometimes get from sexuality professionals is, you have to be able to speak up about what feels good for you. But some people have trouble even knowing what feels good because either they've not had a lot of space to really experience their own sexual feelings and desires, or they've been very busy focusing on someone else's feelings and desires, or that just hasn't been in the forefront of their mind because they've been surviving something else. So I think this issue of being able to connect first and foremost with the self is a lot of what we discuss in Awaken Your Sexuality. There's an entire half of the book is about learning your own feelings and understanding your own responses to your desires, to your fears, to your body.
In your book, you both describe sexuality as much more than sexual behavior. How would you define healthy sexuality?
I feel like that's a fun trick question because I can only define healthy sexuality for myself. The way that we define healthy sexuality is what is healthy for each person is going to be very unique and individual, but it has everything to do with feeling safe, with feeling connected, and with feeling like you're in a state of mutuality and respect, right? So I don't know what that looks like for another human being. Their body, their desires, whatever they want to play out with someone else is their business. But when we think about what's healthy versus unhealthy, we have to remember that there's a great variety there, huge variety. And that what we're looking for when we're looking for healthier relationships is, am I calm? Do I feel good more of the time than I feel stressed or unhappy? When I'm stressed or unhappy, do I feel like I can discuss it? Does my partner feel like a safe person to fix problems with? These are sort of the ground floor. And it turns out that, you can have great sex in any number of situations, but a sexual relationship takes a lot of trust.
How can someone who has suffered from addiction and trauma begin to reconnect with themselves in a way that really provides great intimacy?
What a beautiful idea to connect with yourself in a way that is intimate, right? Especially when it doesn't always feel safe in your own body when you've experienced addiction or trauma. And so I would say the best answer to how is slowly, slowly, gently. We can't be in a rush for this kind of change because it's difficult enough already to be getting sober. It's difficult enough already to be reducing use or doing harm reduction. It's difficult enough to be trying to come to terms with a trauma or a history of traumatic events. So all of those things take time and energy. Attending to your own body and your own feelings is part of that. But sometimes people are in a rush to fix relationship issues or fix sexual issues because they think that they have to get those things sorted right away. But I would say, remembering that all of these things take time. And my co-author, Stephanie Covington, likes to talk about the upward spiral of recovery. It's an image that I find really, really helpful. And so have thousands of other people. It's this idea that if addiction or trauma symptoms are a downward spiral where your life becomes smaller and more constricted, then recovery is an upward spiral where you start feeling more expansive. But you might still circle around some memories or some issues. You might hit them again and again. It's just that you arrive there with more tools, more capacity each time. So remembering that healing is not linear, recovery is not linear, Connecting with your own body has to be slow, patient, and you have to be willing to allow for surprise and for things to be unexpected.
So, to kind of dovetail with that, then, so why is self intimacy and self care such an important foundation before building intimacy with someone else, especially in recovery?
Yeah. So we say that you really do want to focus on developing some self intimacy before focusing on your relationships or your connections with others for a couple of reasons. One of them is that, especially for people who've been socialized as girls and women, there's a pressure to attend to the sexual desires and needs of partners over your own, especially if you are in a relationship with men. So for women who date men, the intensity of that pressure is ongoing and constant. It's a little bit different for queer women, but fundamentally, there's a gender training there that just lives on. And so being able to be aware of your own body's feelings, your own yeses and nos, and being able to honestly offer a yes, a no, or an I'm not sure. Let's try it, but I might want to call it. Being able to offer those kinds of true answers to somebody when you're trying to be sexual begins with knowing what your own feelings are. You have to be able to know what your own feelings are. And that self intimacy is so fundamental.
And is that why there's such usually or like a requested gap of dating and being intimate with folks for people who are in any type of program that they just take that time to reconnect with themselves before they start dating and getting into maybe other cycles?
It is the foundation of that idea. I mean, there's some wisdom in saying, wait a bit and connect with yourself, especially if you're in recovery from problematic substance use of any kind, right? There's some wisdom in that. But the way that a suggestion or a wise idea becomes a rule is such an interesting trouble, because when you give people the rule of don't date for your first year of sobriety, which anyone who's been to a recovery meeting has surely heard this, right? Get sober and stay sober for a year before you date anyone. Okay, well, we know that doesn't work for a lot of people. We know there's many, many people for whom that feels unreasonable. There's people for whom relational practices are actually part of how they recover. So it doesn't always work for everyone to give a rule like that. However, there's a great deal of wisdom in the idea that taking some time to really focus on your own self and your own feelings is key, right? So it's not a either or. It's about finding an individual path through the questions and understanding that, like, okay, if I'm trying to do some recovery from something and I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks and I fall madly in love with someone in my meeting, is it helpful to me to rush into that relationship and start obsessing about that relationship as much as I obsessed about the thing I'm trying to recover from? Or might it be better for me to notice, wow, I'm having a really big feeling about this and I have a lot of yearning. I have a lot of longing. What a what an intense experience. Why don't I try to ride that out, notice it, experience it, and see what it has to teach me before I have a lot of behaviors that might change my life?
So, how can someone begin to reconnect with themselves and their body, especially after years of feeling disconnected or really emotionally numb?
Yeah. There's a lot of practical ways to start trying to reconnect. In Awaken Your Sexuality, there's several exercises for people to try. There's also a workbook for people who prefer just to be doing that sort of hands-on reflective questioning and doing activities. There's ways to start reconnecting that are just about reflection, journaling, answering questions. There's ways of reconnecting that are about physical practices. Some of them are sexual practices around touching your own body. Some of them are not. Some of them are about breathing, noticing other sensations. One of my favorite activities for reconnecting with the body is about reconnecting with your five senses. And for this activity, every day you focus on a different sense. And so obviously people who don't have access to all of their senses, if they're blind or hard of hearing, that they would adjust in order to make this work for them. But in general, it's about one day you're looking around you and really thinking about what you see. What's pleasurable to your eye and what is not pleasurable to your eye? And just noticing how you feel when you see things that bring you joy or pleasure. And then the next day, you focus on hearing. What sounds do you like? What sounds bring you joy or pleasure? What does it feel like in your body? And really attuning to your senses in this way. Most people are pretty attuned to visual and auditory, but a lot of people ignore their sense of smell or their sense of taste. These are things that, especially if you've been in a substance use, like a time of heavy substance use, reclaiming your sense of smell and taste is part of recovery. And learning how to smell and taste things again can be a real joy. So these are ways to start connecting again with the body. They're small, they're simple, they're often overlooked, but they're also very foundational.
So, what role would shame and self compassion play in the healing process?
Shame and self-compassion are both huge parts of recovery for most people. So shame is attendant to addiction. Shame comes as an attendant to sexual trauma, to any kind of physical trauma. Um, it's part of the way that we reckon with what happened, because we do live in a culture that tells us, especially tells women, that if something bad happened to them, it was probably their fault. And so we often rake ourselves across the coals trying to figure out, how could I have prevented this? What did I do wrong? This is especially true for women with addiction who have a trauma that happens while they are intoxicated, right? There's a sort of double shame there, or if they cause harm while they're intoxicated. So shame is often the reason why people begin a recovery process, because the pile up of shame or the pile up of regret has become so intense. So we have to learn to face those things that create that shame and understand guilt to be different from shame. We can feel a healthy amount of guilt about doing something that caused harm, but we don't have to carry the imprimatur of shame that tells us I'm a bad person. It's because I'm bad. So we are trying to transform that idea, that feeling that this is happening to me because I'm bad. We're trying to transform that into something more self-compassionate that understands, yes, I may have experienced things that were terrible. I may have done some things that I regret. I may have made choices I would not repeat, but that does not mean that I can't be a multifaceted and lovable human, and that I can't start behaving in ways that I respect now. And self-compassion is the way forward, because it allows us to do some forgiveness of the self and to seek connections that have a little more flexibility and expansiveness in them. So we all are going to be looking at some shame. And self-compassion is the ladder out of that muck.
Are there certain things that we need to be aware of as people are going through their ongoing recovery? Maybe some tips on just how to maintain their recovery?
One thing I think is wonderful to think about is how wise and wonderful this idea of one day at a time really is. Um, it's not it's not actually originating in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's ancient, right? It's an ancient idea. Mindfulness and any practice that allows you to stay in the present moment is thousands and thousands of years old. So when we think about how to maintain recovery and how to keep moving forward, we have to remember again this spiral I talked about. There are going to be times where we feel like we're right back where we started, but we're not. Time has moved forward. We've learned things. We may have made the same mistake, but we can respond to it differently. Remembering that we have the capacity to keep changing. It's about some people will recognize the idea of a growth mindset. No matter where I am, if I practice something, I can improve on it, right? So maintaining recovery is really about that concept that every day I just am trying again. I'm just trying again today. We'll see what happens today, and I'm trying again. And one of the people that we spoke to that really influenced my thinking about this was a woman in recovery who said, all I have to do is get to the end of the day. I have to get to midnight. And sometimes midnight is 7 p.m. and I get in
Oh.
bed. I get in bed at 7, and that's it. I'm done, but I got there. So I do think that is sort of the core of any long-term process of recovery is remembering that every day you just have to keep doing it. It's an every day is a new day kind of thing.
So, how can someone tell the difference between emotional safety and emotional avoidance?
I don't know if I can answer this question about emotional safety and emotional avoidance in 5 minutes. I'm going to try. How can you tell the difference between emotional safety and emotional avoidance? I don't know if you can right away because if avoidance feels safe, then avoidance feels safe. That's it. Vulnerability does not always feel safe. It can feel absolutely terrifying. Emotional safety with another human being involves moments where you feel really scared and you try something anyway and it has a positive outcome. But you can't put the responsibility of creating safety on the other person all the time, right? So you need to choose people who are doing their best to create safety for themselves and for you. And you also have to be safe enough in yourself that you know that if this other person makes a mistake or says something harsh or whatever, that you can work it out, that you have enough emotional safety in your own self that you can stand in your true experience and talk with them. So, how do you know the difference between avoiding something difficult and true, like, depth of emotional safety? I actually think that's just something you have to experience. I don't think you can tell beforehand where you are. You have to just keep practicing. It's sort of like, how can you tell in your body if you're learning how to throw a basketball? How can you tell if it's going to go in? And you can't until you've practiced and practiced and practiced. And then eventually you start feeling, that was a good one. And you're right, you know? And so there's something about this that's like, you can't know it before you've tried. And you have to put in that time and effort in order to keep taking those sort of calculated risks emotionally and layering in safety until you feel like, this is a better connection. Now I understand what it feels like.
So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about healing, especially after sexual trauma?
When we think about healing from sexual trauma, one of the biggest misconceptions people have about it, and I think this is a kind of broader cultural issue, is that sexual trauma is a ruination. That you, in some ways, I think people believe you can't heal from it. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what kind of process is even possible for sexual trauma. It turns out that there's no trauma that you overcome and you've gotten it out of your body and it's done. That's not really how it works. For the most part, if you've had a serious trauma and especially a sexual trauma, it is part of you. It is part of your life, but it does not have to dictate the rest of your life, and it doesn't have to become your entire identity. And so there's, I think, a misconception, especially for women who have experienced sexual trauma and sexual violence, that that's it, that they're broken now. And sometimes people feel this about themselves because they are so devastated in the aftermath of something, and it feels like something has broken. Um, and because there's so much fear and there's so much lack of skill in therapeutic communities around this, I don't know that the message is strong enough out there that you don't have to stay in that place, that brokenness does not need to be the theme of the rest of your life, and that there are ways to become more whole and present, that there's reward for effort in this way. So that's one thing. The other misconception about sexual trauma that I want to make sure I'm talking about is that it only happens to women, when in fact, we know that children of any gender are as at risk as each other, meaning little boys and young queer people are as deeply at risk as girls. So we have a huge silence in our dominant culture about sexual trauma that happens to boys and young men. But it is there, and it is part of the struggle, I think, in trying to understand the effects of trauma, is that we don't tend to offer space for boys and young men to be open about those experiences. So this is something that, once people get older, their risk level changes a great deal. Women stay at much higher risk as they become adults. But that risk of childhood is so severe for boys, and I think that that's something that it would really change our dialogue if we were able to fully incorporate that fact.
Well, Dr. Carlisle, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
I am very easy to find. My name is Vanessa Carlisle. That's my website. That's my Instagram. My co-author is Dr. Stephanie Covington. Her website is stephaniecovington.com. And you can find Awaken Your Sexuality anywhere that books are sold.
Well, Dr. Carlisle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carlisle. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your Nautilus award-winning book, Awaken Your Sexuality, a guide to connection and intimacy after addiction and trauma. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.